Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. What we've been looking at this week is memories we don't have, by which I mean a nostalgia or a cultural memory that is, well, at least questionable in the way that it has developed. One person's good old days is another person's not so good old days. I mentioned yesterday that this has been a way of thinking for human beings for a very long time. Hesiod wrote his Works and Days around 700 BCE, and he appears to be the first person to put into writing the idea that there once was a golden age, an age when you didn't have to work and the gods just hung out with people, etc. But now we live in the Iron Age, and that's really the way all of these Golden Age arguments really work, is we don't live there now, and let's talk about what's wrong with what's going on. But my question today is, how do we remember what we don't remember? Because we do. So let's think about that. Well, one way, of course, is that animals imitate. We have a chimp here using a tool, and we have a chimp here using a stone, two stones to crack a nut, teaching the kid, and of course, the essential for human beings, the ability to use cell phones. So we teach by imitation. The young watch the older doing what they do, and then they're able to do it, by which we pass down information through time. This is how you do this. And primatologists argue that now chimps, anyway, have entered into what they would call a Stone Age. They're a little later than humanity, but they're getting there. Well, we've been telling stories for a long time, and of course, the kings and queens, the pharaohs, etc., have been wanting to tell their brilliant deeds. So here we've got Ramses in a chariot going off to kill various enemies. Here's Ramses with a club holding three enemies by the hair, gonna whack them there. And this is a way that we're communicating with the Egyptians anyway, in both writing and in visual art. Hammurabi not only wrote his laws on stelae and stone with cuneiform, but also his great deeds, who he defeated, how he defeated, the number of lions he would kill in a hunt, and that kind of thing. Of course, we still do this today. We've got here Alabamians, your names are inscribed on fame's immortal scroll. So, yep, there you go. In bronze is a little history lesson. Over here, we have from the Battle of Gettysburg, the Mississippi Monument, in which you sometimes have to turn your one-shot rifle into a club. A little more recent down here, a monument in Washington, D.C. To the Korean War vets. The picture taken in snow because guess what? This is a commemoration of a very cold battle during the Korean War. So that's one way that we communicate history, is we do it in bronze. I'll get back to this in just a bit with the idea of retelling the story of the American Civil War, which is one of the most contested stories in U.S. history. But before we get there, we can look back into the oral cultures. At one time, obviously, people told stories around a campfire. Poets developed as people who had memories of these things. We see a crossing between those two kinds of culture, the oral into the written, with a work like Beowulf. It exists in one written copy. What is there at the top, and or it means it's the word what that we still have, but in those days it meant listen. The translation goes like this: you have heard of the Danish kings in the old days and how they were great warriors. Shield, the son of Sheaf, took many an enemy's chair, terrified many a warrior after he was found an orphan. He prospered under the sky until people everywhere listened when he spoke. He was a good king. So, what we're doing, a couple of things here. We're talking about what good warriors do. They take away the beer hall chairs of other warriors and bust them up when they kill them. And also, they prosper under the sky by passing out all the booty of war. And so you begin to catch on with what's going on here. It goes on. A hard quarrel was made with the Hugas when Higelac went traveling in ships to the land of the Frisians, attacked the Hetware. So again, you're seeing how history is being told. Notice that the H's are alliterative, and that's one of the ways that ancient Germanic poetry was written, to be remembered first off in the oral culture, and then was later written down. But kings and queens helped the poets out by naming their kids with alliterative letters so that they would get in the history books. With a larger army, they brought down that warrior. He fell among his troops. He gave no gifts to his warriors. Again, you pass out war booty if you're a good winner, but this guy didn't win. Since then, the Merovingians have given us no kindness, nor do I expect kindness from the Swedes. Now, this is a particular poet telling this particular story, and this is at the end of Beowulf, when essentially we're being told that Beowulf's people are not going to survive because now that the big guy is gone, there are too many enemies. And indeed, that is what happened. They disappeared. Yes, there are Beowulf reenactors, just as in the U.S. we have Civil War reenactors. In England, you can find yourself a Beowulf reenactor. It is widely known that Heathkin, son of Hrethel, and here you see the H is alliterative, wounded Oginthau near Ravenswood when the Geats arrogantly sought war against the Swedes. Quickly, Oginthau, old and terrible, gave a counterblow, cut down Heathkin, and rescued his wife, that aged woman, bereft of her gold, the mother of Onela and Othir. And again, you see how kings and queens are going to name their kids alliteratively so that the poets can tell these stories later on. And that's one way that history was told. Now, of course, it's going to be told with a spin on how the local poet wants to impress the king and talk about these things in the beer hall among the warriors. Well, another thing that pretends to be, purports to be history is the Hebrew Bible. There's 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles that tell the story of the monarchy of the Hebrew nation. Here we've got Goliath laughing heartily at poor little David. And then on the other side, we've got King Saul, who is just bitter with jealousy toward the harp-playing David, about to hurl a spear and try to kill the poor innocent kid. And of course, this is how you tell the story when you're the winner. David was having his scribes tell his story in a very positive way for David. Well, when did this stop? Or, well, I guess we have to say, did it ever stop? But there have been historians who have tried to tell the story without all the spin. Thucydides, 460 to around 400 BCE, who was an Athenian general and a writer, was the first historian to openly say, I'm not going to talk about the gods. I'm not going to put any spin on this. I want to look at what actually happened during the Peloponnesian War, where he was a general. He says this: on the whole, however, the conclusions I have drawn from the proofs quoted may, I believe, safely be relied on. Assuredly, they will not be disturbed either by the lays of the poet, displaying the exaggeration of his craft. How does he feel about the poets telling these stories, in other words? Or by the compositions of the chroniclers that are attractive at truth's expense, making the story better, Hollywood style. The subjects they treat of being out of the reach of evidence, and time having robbed most of them of historical value by enthroning them in the region of legend. So Thucydides is openly saying, I'm not a poet. I'm not going to pretty this up. This is what actually happened. And he was there. History is philosophy teaching by examples, said Thucydides. And really, that's the idea of telling it the way it was, for him anyway, is that by looking at the way it was, we're actually going to draw conclusions that we can use. And indeed, Thucydides is still used in war colleges today because of how he describes how battles occurred. I just can't help but quote a couple of things from the book. In a democracy, someone who fails to get elected to office can always console himself with the thought that there was something not quite fair about it. So, yes, 400 BCE, already there were some sore losers in the democratic elections. And he does quote Pericles, one of the great leaders of ancient Athens, who said, just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. Probably wise words. Well, one of the things we talk about here in the U.S. a lot is the contested idea from American history of what the Civil War was all about. We've heard recently quite a bit about this book called The Lost Cause from 1866. So you see, immediately after the war is lost, the South begins to tell a different kind of story. You'll see the subheading, A New Southern History of the War of the Confederates, and it's drawn from official sources and approved by the most distinguished Confederate leaders. And this is by Edward Pollard of Virginia, notice, not of the U.S. And this begins what we call the lost cause mythology around the American Civil War, a very typical little painting, the sad Confederate vets furling the flag at the end of the war. Of course, we know that part of the lost cause mythology that we've been talking about began to build monuments out there. And so you look at this one and you see that these folks are not Civil War era. Probably the old fellow over here is a vet of the battle or at least of the war, but these are young folks. And you do see an automobile back over here. This is the late teens, early 1920s, when most of the Confederate lost cause monuments begin to go up. This one, what's the significance? The Battle of Newmarket? Well, no, you probably haven't heard of it. It's a completely, pointless battle that happened to have occurred, but it was a Confederate victory in that, and I don't know that you can see it, but they were victorious over the Federalists. And what they did is they took a federal battery, that would be artillery, and it's by that victory, the VMI cadets. And that's what's important in this particular monument is, of course, the Virginia Military Institute, that they're celebrating the young fellows graduating from there who are destined to be great soldiers, just like their forebears of Virginia. And you see the Confederate battle flag, very, very typical of the lost cause mythology. Another one, this is from the Daughters of the Confederacy, who usually were the sponsors of the various Civil War monuments. These young ladies are out. You do see CSA here, Confederate States of America, with the battle flag again. And again, you can look at the dresses and you can tell that this is not 1865. This is around somewhere in the 1920s with the reinvigoration of the lost cause mythology. And that's one of the things that people were talking about when these monuments were beginning to come down is actually, no, they're not historically accurate, and they're not actually from the war itself. They are very specifically put up for a very specific propaganda reason. In the mail in the U.S., in the South anyway, in the 1960s, this was very likely to come in your mailbox. You can see that it was mailed, and it's a mimeograph, I believe, somewhere in Tennessee. And it says this: out of the ruins of the Civil War, the white people continued to fight the federal government, Zog, a reference which is very typical of a way of thinking in the U.S. that this is all about the Book of Revelation, right? And race mixing. They united together in the Ku Klux Klan under the leadership of General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was, of course, a Confederate general during the war itself. Perhaps the greatest cavalry leader in history. Okay, well, all right, unsupported claim. The Klan restored states' rights to the South and freedom for the white people. Now, today, we are being recalled to defend our race and nation. Will you join or assist our noble cause? Just look at your family and think about it. Yesterday, today, forever, the KKK is here to stay, white pride worldwide. And so this comes in your mailbox and you are or you aren't interested in furthering the Southern cause. But this is very much a product of course, the civil rights era of the 1960s, nothing to do with 1865. A recent book talking about tearing down the lost cause, the removal of New Orleans Confederate statues. You may know that Robert E. Lee came down at night to minimize the protesters out there because, the idea here is, is this history or is this revisionist history or is this mythology and legend being fed to people to keep a certain kind of idea alive, basically white supremacy? Because we do know that cultural nostalgia has real world consequences. The Confederate battle flag, for the first time, marched through the U.S. Capitol just a few weeks ago. So yes, the lost cause doesn't die, it doesn't go away, and it's very much part of the American mythology to this day, and I would argue a dangerous part because it is a memory that we don't have. It's an idea that is being fed to us. Some people believe it, that of a way of living in life that actually never existed. So nostalgia can be a very dangerous thing when it's used for propaganda purposes, I would argue. Well, thanks for listening today. That's what we're looking at this week is the consequences of nostalgia, the consequences of memories that didn't occur, and how the various kinds of cultural memories are told as history through time. Thanks for joining us. Our monthly theme for February is Beloved Community, and I'll be back tomorrow to summarize what we've been talking about this week. Thank you.